Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our panel on Women in Information Security. My name is Joan Goodchild. I'm the editor-in-chief of CSO Online and CSO Magazine. NPR reports that 80% of computer programmers are men. And a most recent body of research sponsored by Symantec found that only 11% of women, or the workforce of information security is only comprised of 11% of women. So as an organization that's dedicated to diversity and appreciates gender diversity, OWASP has asked me here to host this panel on how we can close that gap. We have invited several women and one gentleman for some perspective on that. They're going to give their perspective on the issue as well as share some experiences from the course of their career, and hopefully you all too will have some questions and insight to offer into this issue. So let me introduce our panelists. On the end here we have Dawn Marie Hutchinson. She is the Senior Manager of IT Security for Urban Outfitters. Welcome, Dawn. Second, we have Carrie Scapper. She is a security analyst, penetration tester, incident response specialist with the federal government. In the middle, we have Stacy Bertrand. She is a manager of security with Accenture. Thank you for joining us. Next, we have Nancy Lawrenson. She is the security program manager with Infinite Campus. Thank you for joining us, Nancy. And our gentleman on the panel today is Gary Phillips. He is the senior director of R&D with Symantec. Thank you all for joining us. So let's get the discussion started by getting some input from members of the panelists on how they've seen the role of women evolve and change, contrast perhaps to the beginning of your career to what you're seeing now. Does anyone have any strong feelings about starting? Do you want to start on the end, Dawn?
All right, so when I started in information security, not unlike this room even, I was the only woman really in IT, period. So when I joined that team, I had some cultural hurdles that I had to get over because there were things that the team did together that I might not be interested in. So, but as it's grown, I've been in my career about 15 years now, and I'm in an organization now, Urban Outfitters. 36% of our IT workforce is women at Urban, and that's significant. And so to see that change where I was the only woman in IT to where I'm one of a hearty crowd now is really it's really encouraging, I think.
Testing.
Okay.
So I've been in the industry for maybe like 12 years, and I've actually been working on a book which describes my adventures in this industry. So I just maybe want to read like part of my intro of what my experiences have been like in it. So since I've been in this industry, I've been roofied, poisoned, stalked, targeted by penetration testers, doxxed, targeted by automated dialing attacks, sometimes at my employer, ridiculed, shunned, mocked, the butt of jokes, sexually harassed, exploited, brought to tears, targeted by foreign hacking entities, and targeted by law enforcement. And I'm still here, and come at me, bro.
Stacey?
I guess not quite as intense as that in consulting, but I remember one of my first meetings that I was leading by myself. The company actually thought I was the secretary and asked if I could get coffee. So I think now there's been increased awareness of women in security and women in tech in general, where I'm no longer the secretary. Benefit.
So I guess I probably have the most gray hairs of the women on this panel, meaning I've been around a little bit longer, not necessarily in the IT industry specifically, but involved with some form of technology. I'm going to say the last 30 years. In college, I remember having to kind of sit in the library looking kind of over in the corner where all these guys were around that machine that was making tape and popping out little yellow tape with dots all over the floor, and kind of wondering, gosh, that looks interesting, but they'd laugh at me if I walked over there and asked what was going on. And as it happened, one of my best friends in college, a gal that was she was also an athlete, a volleyball player in particular. She was a computer science major, and I always thought, wow, is she ever gutsy for getting involved in that? And today she's actually an environmental engineer, nothing to do with really computers. And at the time I was an education major, and now I'm very much involved in computers. So my path to this career has traversed through, having a deep interest, but kind of being scared about being involved with what was going on over in the corner of the library, to now being, dead center. And I think probably all of us have experienced some of the same, difficulties getting to where we are. But on the positive side, I think probably all of us have some characteristics of being fairly, confident in ourselves. We haven't been shy about stating our position of where other people stand, and I think that's kind of some of the armor that we've had to wear over the years to get where we're at, sadly.
So since we raised the issue of gray hair, you can probably guess I've been in it for a few years now, and when I started out, there were no women that I worked with, and as of 2 weeks ago, I accepted a new position working for the Chief Security Officer of Symantec, and she is in fact a woman. And that represents a pretty big tectonic change for me and what I perceive in terms of how things are changing. It is a journey. We're not there yet, but we're getting there. We're making progress.
And I think a lot of that stems from, I've heard that we're mistaken for secretary often, these kinds of things. But part of our role, in women in these organizations is, I'm leading an organization, a security organization myself, is stepping up and just not automatically assuming the role. So, I will be the first person to admit when we talk about planning a lunch meeting, I get right to it. I hop right to it. I have people that work for me that could absolutely do that, and I don't know why I feel compelled to step up and do that. But that is one of the hurdles that I think that we put our own selves in, or that I know that I have personally put my own self in, is, it's not enough to say, yes, we've overcome some hurdles, but we've created our own as well. So taking the time to step up and say, I don't need to do that kind of activity, or I don't need to, the printer, we can call somebody to take care of the jammed piece of paper in the printer. I'm sorry that the coffee service isn't up to your standard. Why don't you call somebody? Yeah. So I do think that a good portion of our moving up into security roles or in technology and as a whole is letting go of that notion that you have to caretake your office. I don't caretake my office staff. In fact, I think in my role, my authority kind of position has helped me to shed that, let me caretake you.
I think it's a really interesting point that maybe we could hear from some other folks on too. I would agree with you too, as a full-time working mother and the authority figure in my publication. I am often feel compelled to organize for others and take on that role. So does anyone else feel that, to Don's point, that can sometimes be a challenge, or maybe counter to that? Have you spent years of your career being hell-bent on breaking that stereotype? Nancy, I can tell you so.
Well, as it happens, my background and many of my early career years was actually in education, and I was actually an athletic coach. I was a head coach of several women's athletic teams, volleyball and softball in particular. And those skills have helped me a great deal over time to be assertive, to be organized, to delegate, to have assistant coaches or other people do things that I needed them to do, just because as a leadership position, I needed to be more focused on the task at hand than worrying about lunch arrangements for the team after the game. Mm-hmm. And so I think I've had those experiences early in my career, and that sort of formed my the basis for then how I've been able to act in other leadership roles. I just don't, thankfully, I haven't felt like I needed to make the coffee or plan those arrangements. But I really think that came from super early on in my career where I was not I was not made to be in those positions. So I think it was probably really hard to shed that if that was an expectation and you somehow, did those things early on.
Yeah, I started in IT as an admin, so I think that's part of, like, getting rid of that was a struggle for me.
Carrie?
Yeah, I haven't had a problem with that.
Yeah, good. But tell us
yeah, I'm not like that. I think that's maybe personality-wise or something like that. I don't plan lunches or do any of that stuff.
Right, yeah.
But something I like to maybe bring up is, if you insert here, like, male-dominated industry, you're going to have some problems. What's different about the IT industry versus maybe some other industries? I think that one of the worst industries to work for as a woman is, like, the financial industry. Those guys are pretty bad. But in that industry, there's a lot more women than there are, but that took time. They still have to deal with, being sexually harassed or, looked over for promotions and stuff like that. But I say maybe 35 years, maybe there'll be more women in our industry. It's going to take time. The girls are going to have to deal with this stuff for a while. And I think one of the contributing, like, factors to why it's so hard for girls in IT, maybe, like, some of the guys in it are socially inept, so they don't know how to deal with women anyway. So then when they have to work with them, they're not so good at it. And maybe I think also, like, this certain mindset, like the sense of humor that kind of goes along with, I think, people in IT anyway. It's just so cruel. Like, you guys know, we're cruel. We make fun of everybody, for everything. So if you're a girl, you're going to get hit with the girl jokes, it's just going to happen. Make me a sandwich.
Well, maybe I think it's more that I think IT is more casual. I think a better way of kind of couching it is that IT organizations tend to be more casual than, say, a finance organization. But, perhaps consulting is an area where IT consulting is more formal because it is a professional services type organization, and perhaps you see a little less of some of the joking and what have you. But I actually don't feel like we have it all that bad. I actually find that at IT, I think given the casual nature of the environment, I think you're allowed to have more better relationships with with the people that you work with. And I think that as a whole, when you have relationships with people, when you're able to work with them, I think you don't encounter as much of the stereotyping because you're somebody that they work with and they know, and I actually, certainly I have had my fair share of team outings to strip clubs. That kind of thing.
No, girl, no.
That could, could stand to. But as a whole, I actually just don't think that my career progression has suffered at all from, I don't feel like I've ever been held back or ever been manipulated or, in any kind of fashion.
So what about, let's talk a little bit more about relationships, with the people that you work with, and obviously it is still a male-dominated industry. Have you had mentors over the course of your career? Have you specifically made a point to seek out female mentors, or do you think it's just as important or equally as valuable to have men as mentors in your career? Does anyone want to start with that point?
Maybe I'll just jump in real quick with that. If I could say anything, just kind of stress to other girls in the industry, never get involved with anyone you work with. I've never shat where I eat, and I suggest everybody do the same, because you'll lose respect if you go that route. I think that girls in the industry, when they come across other girls, like, sometimes they're mean, sometimes they're not nice, sometimes they are nice, they're welcoming to other girls, and sometimes they're not. So you're finding a female mentor in it, like, well, it's hit or miss. Maybe she's going to be friendly to you. Maybe she sees you as an opponent. Right. So it can get very competitive.
Could have its challenges. Okay. Other thoughts?
I think when it comes to seeking out a mentor, I'm not sure that I would seek out a woman mentor just because she would relate to me. Your mentor isn't meant to be your friend. They're not. They should be somebody that can help steer your career. Mine was the first chief of security I worked for, and it's somebody that you can trust to have really candid conversations with. And so I don't necessarily think that I would seek out a mentor because she's a woman. I need somebody that can help me navigate the direction of my career. That being said, I mean, I'm open to mentoring other women in the field, but it would only have to be because there's some sort of natural connection. I feel like they have the same kind of drive and motivation that I have, because I think ultimately it's the drive and motivation that makes you go places, and I don't really think that gender will keep you or promote you any faster.
And I concur. One of my early mentors was a gal, Dr. Lydia Binger, and her motto was, she was, I would say maybe 25 years older than I was, had been in the industry a long time, and her motto was that she was going to outlive the bastards. And she was exactly that person. She understood the games, the politics that she needed to play to be in the industry as long as she was. And I learned those tricks from her, and learned when I needed to keep my mouth shut, when I needed to play along, when it was okay to say no, I don't want to go to the shooting range with everyone. My current employer has a penchant for guns, and being about, I think there were three women. One was the secretary, and then myself and another salesperson, and everyone got the invite to the gun range, and it was easy to say no. I just didn't want to, and it wasn't a problem. But yeah, as far as mentors, I agree. I've had both, probably male and female mentors. In fact, I still have one fellow that I really, he's my go-to guy when I want to bounce things off him, and Dr. Binger is retired and enjoying somewhere up in northern Minnesota. But I still actually do contact her once in a while just to say, what do you think about this? And she's been, invaluable. And honestly, my husband has been another person that I've been able to bounce things off of, to get the male perspective, and that's been helpful.
Is Lydia still doing okay?
She's doing
Has
great.
she outlived everybody?
She has so far outlived the bastard.
I'd add, I think trust is the most important thing. You want to choose a mentor that you can be candid with and trust that your candor is held in confidence. Male, female, I don't think that matters so much, although I will say having a diverse perspective that you bring in with your mentorship is really important, and your best hope of getting that is to have diverse mentors, including men and women. And that doesn't necessarily mean you can't have one primary mentor. I would encourage everyone to have someone who's your go-to person, but to seek perspectives from other people that you trust as well.
Great. Thank you all for your thoughts.
Yeah, I would also just add that I think that as a woman, particularly in any field really, I think women are more susceptible to how people receive them than I think oftentimes in mentoring conversations, men don't find that they'll enter a conversation where they're like, well, you're not being received well, or I think people suspect you, as dingy or bad. I don't think men encounter that. So part of having that diversity is getting a good broad sense of how are people receiving you, because that's how you ultimately can make changes to the way you move through your career, is understanding that whether or not you intend to, how you're being received is important in terms of developing your career.
I just want to jump in on that. Well, first of all, I would love to go to the shooting range, bang, bang, baby. But for me, in my experience, it's really annoying when I have to meet new people in the industry. I feel like I have to walk around with my resume or like email it to them so they can read it first so they can immediately start treating me respectfully. I feel like when I meet people, it's like I'm rebooting a machine. I have to start all over again. Yes, I work in this industry. Yes, I've been in this industry a long time. Yeah, I'm bad. I just have to go through everything again because that initial expectation for people is, I don't know what it is, but it's not, who I actually am. And my talent and stuff like that. So I think that that's really annoying. I constantly like just have to like start all over again every time I enter a new scene or group of people.
So, what about thoughts on taking it back even further than the career? I mean, what can be done, especially these days, at an earlier level, perhaps even at the education level, to foster the idea that, young women should be interested in these careers these days, and that, InfoSec or even just IT is something that more women should consider at the educational level. Stacey?
Yeah, so by, I guess, education or by trade, I was a linguist and not at all related to technology or security in particular. I think one of the main overlaps between languages, which I guess can be considered more female-dominated or proportionally has more females versus tech, the overlapping aspect is women aren't willing to jump in unless they're certain. Men are, they'll just go. Like, doesn't matter if it's right or wrong, they just want to talk, they just want to get out there. And as far as technology, they just want to start playing with it. Women are more cautious, like, I don't want to break it. I don't want to do something wrong in the tool. So I think there's the gap of we have to tell women it's okay to play. It's okay to make mistakes. To your point of being perceived wrong, if you're making mistakes and you're learning, that's fine. You're not being perceived as, less educated or less intelligent, less informed. And I think that's the gap that often keeps women back from industries like technology or engineering, mathematics, security, that ability to play without fear of rejection. I think.
Good point. Any other thoughts on that?
I don't recommend this industry for nice girls.
Really? Well, could you expand on that a little bit? I mean, if you were going to go out and you were invited
I have a daughter.
to speak at a
I'm going to
campus,
push her to be like an opera singer
so
or
if
something.
she says, I want to be like mommy, you're like, no way.
No.
You're going into medical school.
Yeah, I'm
or
not.
something
No,
like that,
I've just, it's been too hard for me. You remember like the beginning of my stuff? Like it wasn't just me that got roofied. I know like 3 other girls that got roofied.
Yeah.
Why does it have to be part of like my job thing where if I go to an event, someone's going to like try and flip me something? And that's common in this industry. And that's disgusting. So I'm angry. Somebody else
Anyone
talk.
have any, counter thoughts on maybe changing that culture? Or?
Okay, so the company I work for is in the education industry. We provide software for schools to run their business, K-12 public schools. And we look at our development population. We're at about 20% of our development force is women. I'm going to say the average age of our development force is 26 to 30, so a fairly young group. And we're very interested in looking at why we only have 20%. We would like to have more. In particularly, the education industry is predominantly women. There was a study done in 2010 by the American Association of University Women, and I would really recommend anyone that's interested in growing their program to attract more women. It was called Why So Few, the study was. And effectively, the communication was that, the industry in general has 20% women. How come we don't have so many in IT? Well, our farm team is still 20% women, and you really need to roll all the way back to middle school age, young girls and boys at the middle school age, and really start pushing to get them involved in STEM activities, science, technology, engineering, and math. That curriculum alone is what is seeding all of our potential employees. If you're an employer or a college person looking to attract undergrads, I think the answer to the low number of women in IT is really the low number of women in the STEM careers, and that if we want to improve that and sort of get strength by numbers in IT, what we need to do is be doing outreach to schools at that age, activities, promoting those things, providing leadership opportunities for girls and young women in the early years, middle school, say on up, or perhaps even elementary school, and start that way. And so I do agree with Carrie in that it will be a while until we get there, but it's because of this reason. We need to start way earlier than we are. If we have more kids that are leaving high school and going to college and getting involved in engineering careers, then we're going to have more people to select from the workforce, right?
I agree with everything you just said, and I'm working in that direction myself, but I'd also add I wouldn't let that stand in our way of being proactive about recruiting in the here and now, too. There's sort of a habit with corporate America where we feel like we have to recruit people for skills that we need, and they have to possess those skills before they come on board. They have to be impactful the moment that they arrive. Well, and I'll say this of a former employee of mine, or employer of mine, because they don't exist anymore, so I can say this. Compaq was very clear about this. We recruit for skills, but we fire people for attitude. And so how about if we change the paradigm a little bit and we recruit people for attitude and aptitude and interest and say, here's a person, a woman, a minority, some group that we already have underrepresented in the situation, and say, they've got the round package, the personality that we're looking for, but they don't have the exact skill set I'm looking for. Let's make an investment in them up front. Let's recruit them in, hire them, and give them education and training so that they are appropriate to the job. I agree with everything that you just said. In fact, I'm volunteering at a local magnet school to lead sessions on cybersecurity and get kids engaged, and it's a magnet school that is particularly aimed for girls and minorities. So I'm making that effort to pull people in. But I also think there's a near-term play that we need to engage as well.
Well, I also think we need to talk about benefits and skills. I mean, part of, I think, our problem is that when women drop out of the workforce to have children, technology is moving so fast that we can't come back in. So, you know, we work in an environment where we come up with the solutions that allow people to work from home. So why are we not creating opportunities for women to maintain their careers and raise a family? I think that there's definitely some room for improvement there. Like I said, you know, innovation is happening so quickly that someone's on the shelf for a year, maybe two, at home raising children, and she's having a hard time getting back in. So there's a void there too. It's not enough to just get them in. We need to keep women in the field, and we need to create, you know, and the same goes for fathers in the room. I mean, women can't you know, manage family well if their spouses aren't. So if we start getting this culture where fathers are getting just the same kind of benefits as women, then we can see women come up because they're getting more help at home as well.
Yeah, I just had a 1-year-old. I was working as a pen tester. I got pregnant. The consultancy I worked for suddenly didn't have any work for me anymore. I had to go quickly get another job. I worked all throughout my pregnancy, went right back, and I'm working remotely 100%, so I guess I raised my kids. So it can be done. And, I mean, I also did this stuff when I was a single mom, so it can be done. There's a lot of women in this room right now, and you know what? Applaud yourselves. You're here. We all know that this is hard. It's hard to be here, so.
So, I'm mindful of our time, and before we find out that we've only got a few minutes left, I was hoping to open it up to the audience before we get into any closing thoughts. If anyone's got any questions that they'd like to throw in, or comments that they would like to make right here in the front, sir?
So I have a questions around the last topic that came up around recruiting. So I'm a hiring manager, and in my area in full tech, we've got a pretty large full tech group. We've hired in the last year 5 new security researchers, and of all of the applicants, we've had, I think, 2 female applicants for the positions out of hundreds of resumes. We thought about something about the farm team is skewed one way. So we actually, also minority applicants, we've got basically none other than the location. We changed our requirements around. So the basic requirements for the position, we dropped the degree requirement. We started focusing on people who maybe didn't enter field dominated, people very different from themselves, but maybe did stuff on their own. So we could get people who had gone to the computer science schools. We made all of these changes, and still were unable to get what do we do differently? How do we get somebody like you to come and apply for a job at our company when the jobs are out there and we're trying?
Did you try targeted recruiting, like recruiting on campus with organizations like Society of Women Engineers?
So we have events. Our CEO actually hosts MIT group similar nature. I don't know exactly that in our building for the regular meetings.
I find that there's a couple of groups, like that's one, and also the Grace Hopper Institute is a really, really great place to find qualified women for technology positions too. And so if you try a little targeted recruiting where you're trying to collect resumes, not in the open market, but aimed in specific areas, you might be more successful, or it might increase your success rate.
Also, we're pretty good about sending people to career fairs at the local university, and we try really hard to have a good representation of women that attend those, even if they're not necessarily developers. Maybe they're QA engineers or product analysts, but having a good representation of women at the career fairs, high school career fairs, college career fairs, at the state fair, they have a career fair. So those kinds of activities are good, and have people that are outgoing and are willing to talk to people, not just a shrinking violet that is a good developer.
I want to give everybody a chance if I can. So right here, question?
You've been talking a little bit about diversity, and while you have a gentleman on the panel who's all white, we are not a diverse industry. We're not a diverse industry at all. However, do you find that the economic reality, let's say in some of the developing countries, lead to more women in the workforce? I know that we have people here who work for companies with international development at the very least.
So Symantec has a very large population of Asian people, particularly from the Indian subcontinent, but Asian in general. That doesn't give us true diversity, I don't think. We're underrepresented in African American and other nationalities and cultures and races too. The problem, I think, kind of gets to the economics, that higher education is expensive and minorities are economically disadvantaged, and so the pool that we can recruit from is much smaller. The answer is kind of what we were discussing, the long game. How can we get more kids, more minority kids, more girls engaged in STEM education and increase the pool by that way?
Yeah, Accenture is known for a lot of their outsourced capabilities, and this I actually do see women in a lot more roles and higher roles. I, in particular, manage a team in India, and the team is we have one man and 6 women, and the manager of the IDC team is a female. We also have teams in Czech Republic and in South America, and those teams are also predominantly, or not predominantly, but at least more equal between men and women. So I guess it's a little bit split based on what role these individuals are having and what capacity the company is growing in.
Yes.
I would like to know if the panel has any suggestions for OWASP to engage female in engineering, both long-term and short-term?
Specific, OWASP specific?
Well, again, I think about our local chapter in the Twin Cities. I'm usually one of the only women that are there. It would be really neat to think that you could have some representation even in the different chapters at high schools, at career fairs, at these STEM organizations. I really, really feel that the key to getting better numbers on the employment end of things is to work on your numbers on the growth and development end. And I don't think OWASP has done too much in the way of interacting with high school summer programs, science, STEM camps, robot day. There's just a ton of activities. While it's not security specific, it's it's heading in that direction, and so that would be my advice.
Other questions? Yes, Jonathan.
So when I first started in security, and like I said, I was the only woman in IT in my first team that I was on, and as the team grew, I mean, it grew more men and not more women into the field. But I knew that my boss or the leadership of my organization observed that part of that problem was cultural. And just changing just a couple of the activities, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to stop the party. And I think that women need to be mindful of that it's not enough to walk in and say, you're not allowed to do that anymore because I'm here. Because that's not really the direction we want to go as women, right? We can do things and we can be part of your team and we can be part of the fun. We just don't have to, let's just pick better activities to do together. Let's pick different conversations to have together, because inevitably we all get along in any other environment. I mean, men and women get along historically, obviously. So why we can't figure out how to get along in the workplace, and specifically because we're in IT, it's like you don't have to choose activities that are centric to any one group. And I think women need to kind of, in some respects, suck it up a little bit and accept that it's going to take a while for the organization to recognize that this might not be an inclusive cultural norm, right?
Carrie, I know as someone who's been kind of on the receiving, you've spoken very strongly about, your feelings on some of those cultural challenges. Any thoughts on diffusing certain situations or,
Yeah, so I do, and it's kind of directed not at hiring managers, I don't know what to tell you, but to the girls, to ladies. Ladies, because there's so few of us, we have to be held to a higher standard, all right? You have to behave. You are out there and you're not representing women in this industry well, you're just making it harder for everybody else, So I think that the best way to overcome a stereotype in general is to be the exception to that and, to carry yourself well enough to, just keep a high level of standard. Sometimes if we have some women in the industry like Marissa Mayer or whatever, and they do stupid things and embarrass the rest of us, well, it just makes it that much harder for someone else to, go be a CEO of a search engine company. So hold yourselves to a high standard, please.
And I'll just say one word: respect. I just think that it's a mutual respect. You can't expect to be treated fairly. I don't think it's fair to give anyone, men or women, a leg up because of their gender, and you have to kind of earn the respect of your peers, and so behave in a way that you want to be treated, treat others in that same way. So respect.
I think we had a question or comment right here.
I'm actually writing my master's thesis on this topic, so this is very, very interesting what you said. But my main concern when this happens is looking forward down in the future where educating women and minorities, trying to bring them up in the sense of and increasing their participation. How do you guys feel about the impact of pop culture, even pop culture as a connection to bringing them up? So, women may not be intimidated by cyber, may not be intimidated by information and, the gender disparity and all that. So can you just give me some insight?
Sure. So I think we're in a great place in that respect, because our homes are filled with digital natives. My children, I have 4-year-old twins, can work their way around technology almost as well as I can, and I work in the field. So technology is more accessible naturally to children because it's part of pop culture. So Urban Outfitters, we have 5 brands, but they're edgy brands, and we're deliberately taking steps to put the technology, using pop culture out there, and engaging with our consumers across all platforms. So with an omni-channel marketing perspective, we're grabbing those people and drawing them into the technology fields through the pop culture. And I think being able to identify that and accept that this new generation of consumer or new generation of professional is already technology savvy. They already are technology professionals. We just need to adopt the way we operate or run our organizations to embrace the way that they work. And embracing the way that they work and the way they use the technology will help us bring them into our field moving forward. Finding the transition.
So it's like, oh, hacking's cool now. It's like all in the media. I've seen it. I've seen how it's just more like widespread. People talk about it. It's in newspapers and stuff like that all the time. So that, I think, is spurring a rise in girls coming into this industry. But I'm still saying we're 35 years out. It's going to take a hot minute for the girls to catch up, and they're never going to catch up. Maybe they'll be like a quarter of the industry in 30 years. That's what I say.
Are you a fan of The Big Bang Theory? Oh, I highly recommend it. 2 of the 3 female leads in the show are scientists, and very strong in their own rights. And I've kind of seen the effect of pop culture in other fields and other genres where it's made a difference in how society accepts or expects behavior to occur. So I'm a big fan of The Big Bang Theory, both for the humor side of it. I think I've worked with all of those people before, but also for the social change that it's engendering. And so, yeah, I am seeing that. There's also a negative side to it, too, and I'll acknowledge Kelly here. Kelly got me to watch this documentary film called Misrepresentation, and it's about how women are intentionally objectified in mass media. I'd encourage everybody to watch it. It was kind of fascinating and informing. Not everything in it is a surprise, but there's some things in there that really make you think. So pop culture can be both a positive and a negative influence, and so the chore for all of us is to absorb the positive side and reject the negative side.
To jump in, I almost take the exact opposite approach. It's not that women don't see, hacking is cool. Like Big Bang, there are 2 great females. But there's still Office Space, the movie, where tech is seen as a geeky guy industry that sexy girls don't want to be a part of. Like, I'm too cool to be in technology because even though there are cool women there aren't cool men there. So I think it has to morph the whole industry of, tech isn't seen as a back office. I sit alone in a cubicle down in the basement. It needs to morph as an industry to this is something that's cool and accessible, and everyone should want to aspire to it, not female, male, I think.
That movie isn't over 10 years old.
It's still quoted daily in my office.
It's iconic, but at the same time, we're seeing the revolution of things moving forward.
Well, and even in the cultural change also that you mentioned is, part of that is this women in leadership. And we have 5 people on the panel, and at least 2 organizations have CISOs that are women. So, it's not even just about bringing us up in numbers, but bringing us up in leadership. And you're seeing that leadership when I'm seeing heads nodding. It's not just about getting women into the field. I mean, you get into that leadership space, and you just create that different culture that's more accepting across both genders.
I do think, from my perspective, we've made great strides from the Jimmy Fallon, Nick Burns, your company's computer guy days about 15 years ago, the guy who, was the geek that could, shame everybody.
Move.
Yeah, move. Okay. We are running out of time, so I have some closing thoughts. One of the goals of this panel that we had talked about before we all came out here was to talk about some action points. How can we keep this conversation going beyond just events like this? I mean, does anybody have any thoughts about how you might take this back to your workplace, in your career, how we might continue these efforts, and some action items we could, perhaps dedicate ourselves to going forward in the next few years? So we'll start with Dawn.
So I participate in a couple different women's groups in technology. There's Women in Information Technology, and there's the Women's Technology Leadership Forum. And then, also in our alumni groups. I mean, everybody here went somewhere. So I just recently graduated from St. Joseph's and University in Philadelphia, and they have She United. And just being a part of that organization and bringing the topic up for discussion, I think is the best way to move it forward. The other things is to talk about, for women, since we largely fill the room, is to talk about that benefits component. Like, how can you make sure that you don't have to put your career on ice when you leave the technology workforce? Because I do think it's more challenging for a woman in technology to drop from the workforce for a period of greater than 6 or 9 months than it is for a man. So how do we go back to our organizations and draw upon building better benefit packages for both fathers and mothers when their children come in?
Okay, great thoughts. Any other thoughts going forward, action items?
Yeah, sure. Hey, Katie, what was that website for the girls, the Black Girl Coders or something? What was that? What? Girls Can Code. So there are a couple of organizations where it reaches out to minority girls who are in Black Girls Code, right? Black Girls Code. So I mean, there are some sites and stuff like that where girls can get resources. There are women's groups. There's girls in technology meetups and stuff like that. So there's some vectors where girls can kind of unite. In my professional experience, I did 4 years at a company that was 99% all women. So if anyone ever gets really frustrated, just go work at an all-girl company and be the IC. You can do that. They have that. So, there's hope, I think. Just keep trying.
That's not fancy.
I think we can also think about leveraging social media, leveraging technology to make it a point to point out other women in the career. So publicly calling out people that are doing a good job, tweeting about this panel and naming the women involved. So search engines look at volume as well as other components, but just the sheer volume. So if you want to raise this in the public awareness, do it through social media. That's another outlet for us to call out each other as being good role models or interesting people or whatever.
I got involved in advocacy because Symantec has a diversity and inclusion program, and I was asked to be one of their leaders. My advice to all of you is get involved in your D&I programs, and if you don't have one, start one.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that we have talked about greatly is those cultural nuances. It's like if we can do anything, it's walk out of here and go, you know what? Maybe we're not creating an environment that's awesome. How do we be an awesome team together, working together without going to strip clubs? That's all I'm saying.
Right, absolutely. All right, great. Well, I want to thank our panelists again very much for your thoughts and insight onto this issue, and thank you all for coming today. I hope you enjoyed it. Enjoy the rest of the event.